It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. I couldn't be more excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Kraig Kleeman. He's an author, speaker, consultant, expert on cold calling and prospecting to the C-suite, among other things. And maybe if we ask nicely, he'll tell us about his new book coming out next year called Outcome-Based Selling: How to Close Deals Faster by Focusing on Your Customers' Goals Over Your Product's Value, which is a great title. So when we talk to Kraig today, we're going to focus on two things. One is we're going to jump into social selling pool for a bit, because Kraig's a bit of a contrarian when it comes to social selling, and he has some insights about it that people need to think about. And then we're going to talk for a while about an important topic for every sales team, which is strategic alignment. How are you breaking down the silos between your internal departments and harnessing these resources to focus on winning new business and helping the customer achieve their goals? So Kraig is going to help us sort this all out. Kraig, welcome to the show.
Hey, Andy. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, pleasure to have you. So tell us a little bit about you.
Hey, the first thing I want to tell you is that I'm grateful to be home in my home office today. I've been on the road so darn much. I travel about 200,000 frequent flyer miles a year, and I just got in from Southeast Asia a couple of days ago. And Andy, right now I am staring at Lake Michigan. It is perfectly blue. The sky is perfectly blue. The sun is out. And I will tell you, for downtown Chicago on what is today, December 9th, today we're recording this.
Yeah.
It is as beautiful as it could be at 57 degrees. So
wow.
I'm a grateful camper today. Thank you.
I can imagine, because about a week you'll be knee deep.
You're probably right. I'm surprised we're not knee deep right now. Well, actually,
there's always a price to pay for those extended nice autumns, and usually a bad winter is one of them. So tell us, how'd you get your start in sales?
I got started way back as a young man for selling actually computer hardware for a company named Arrow Electronics.
Sure.
And I started out selling through two end users, and then Arrow came out with a value-added reseller sort of plan and really converted most of us into that. And I picked up kind of a specialty in selling Unix-based systems, and I had some great success there, and moved on into software shortly after that, and selling executive information, or what was, I guess, Gartner Group at that time would have called decision support systems.
Right.
And had 3 years of top sales rep of the year and all those kinds of things. And then left that to start my own company that I grew from 0 to 20 million in sales in 3.5 years. And we had great success selling our digital pre-press software solution on the Apple computer platform.
No, which one was that?
That was, we called it Express Direct. That was both the name of the company and the name of the product. And we grew it fast. We had 25 sellers, all with $1 million quota each, all inside. And sold it to our biggest strategic marketing partner, a company based in Portland, Oregon. And then after that, I got involved with the consulting practice and started writing books and all these sorts of things that you described earlier at the top of the show. So that's a little bit about me.
So through that inside sales team, I imagine that's where you sort of earned this title of the king of cold calling.
Yeah, I will tell you that.
Or did somebody give that to you unwantedly?
My clients started calling me after I, started the practice and started deploying the methodology. And we've now done 75 of these things. 55 of them have been in the SaaS world. And my clients just started calling me the world's greatest cold caller. And I took it as a real compliment, of course. And they were sharing that title for me because of these great outcomes we were getting. And, I always evaluate the before and the after and do an observation at first and those kinds of things. And the world's greatest cold caller started sticking. So then I started just putting it out there on my digital assets. So I'd say the combination of the great work that we experienced at my first company, which was my big laboratory for creating this whole methodology, and then later all the tremendous learning that I've gained in the last 10 years and, 75 engagements later, I like that title, actually, world's greatest cold caller. I don't know if I really am, but I guess I've applied for the job. Let's just put it that way.
Well, there's no one who can take that title away from you. Let's say that. So let's talk about social selling. I mean, before we get into it, I guess let's define it, because there's a lot of different definitions out there about social selling. So before we dive into it, what is it to you?
Yeah, good question. And quite honestly, I think that it does suffer from being properly defined. In fact, if you want to talk about definition, I sort of question even the term social selling. I think it was originally earmarked by our good friends at LinkedIn. I'm not sure of that, but I know a few people at LinkedIn sort of claim that. But I think the term social selling probably is a poor term. I think whoever originated it has a poor respect for words. If dictionary.com defines the word sale as the act of, persuading. I should have pulled it up a minute ago.
That's
I'm going off memory here, but the act of persuading and influencing and in effect coaxing someone to make an actual purchase, a transaction. And social selling, I mean, it literally could never do that. If we define selling or sales as, getting in, providing or demonstrating immutable value, advancing the deal, and then ultimately closing the transaction, other than maybe some, $100, highly transactional sale. I mean, social selling could never be robust enough to cover what I just described in its totality. So the term social selling, I'm not going to try and upend it or change it. I think it's already been adopted, but the term itself, I think, is problematic. But the definition of it, I presume, goes back to, the internet, its vast global reach, the commercialization of it, its reach that is, of course, touched every region of every place literally in the world just about, and commerce being transacted that way. And it houses social media. It houses a bunch of platforms that are social media intensive. And, Facebook, for example, has reached 1 billion subscribers. LinkedIn, I think, is either approaching or is real close or has surpassed 400 million. And so the term social selling has to do with using these tools, these internet housed mediums, to actually influence selling. And I presume it does influence, but in no way is it a full-blown sales process. And I have a variety of sort of reasons behind that, but that's probably the best definition I can give you at this point, Andy.
Right. So social selling, I think you would be happy if we just took the modifier social off of it, because it's just part of what you're going to do, right? You may use it to go out and establish connections with people that are potential prospects for your services. You might do it for, let's say, getting those first entree, maybe establishing a first face-to-face meeting or something, but it's not the life cycle answer that you talked about.
Not even close. And in fact, I see 5 undeniable benefits to what's commonly referred to as social selling, but I also see 7 sort of serious issues. And
you've got numbers, so do you have the 5 memorized and the 7 memorized?
I probably do, yeah.
Okay, well, let's go for it.
Yeah, okay, all right. I'll share those with you, but before I do, I might say this, if I could, Andy. Do you remember way back when 2010, the Arab Spring? Do you remember that movement?
Yes.
So on December 18th of 2010, the world sort of began watching with deep fascination this regional and political movement, the Arab Spring, which was driven in large part by social media. And for our audience who may not know, it was a populist-driven movement mixed with a lot of helpful and unhelpful activities. And 20 nations were cataclysmically affected. And the whole movement became kind of a feeding frenzy that toppled entire governments. And I think that, a lot of people thought that meaningful change would occur in that region of the world. And social media had a big influence. I mean, it certainly allowed for, careful planning. It allowed for tightly managed organization, it's swift communication, fast and efficient, and discernible influence. And some were kind
It
of calling
sounds
it,
like sales.
yeah, it sounds like what sales is supposed to be, right? And some were kind of calling the movement the dawning of the digital democracy. But anyway, in the end, Andy, even though there was an enormous amount of euphoria and incredible sort of jubilation, in the end, even though some cruel dictators were toppled, they were replaced, sadly, by probably less effective, arguably more despotic leaders. And so I think that social selling and the Arab Spring kind of have a few things in common. Now, of course, social selling is entirely peaceful. It's a wonderfully peaceful, movement. Let's admit that right off the bat.
I want to see where you're going with this.
Well, the thing is, both have started with this euphoria, this enormous euphoria that has been fueled in large part by digital assets, and then large part of those digital assets have been social media. They both started with intoxicating euphoria made possible by the internet and its vast global reach. But in the end, just as the Arab Spring was a colossal disappointment for the region and the world, my concern is that social selling has started with all this great euphoria, has all this great sort of hype behind it. But my fear is that in the end, it's going to be a terrible disappointment for those who think they're adopting a tangible, cogent, repeatable, sustainable sales process when in reality they aren't. And, in the end of the day, Andy, my speculation could be wrong, but initial euphoria is never the measuring stick for any new movement. Fair and balanced documented history coupled with movement maturity is the only true measurement.
Yeah. So don't you think you're seeing some? And first of all, I love the way the story went from Arab Spring to social selling. By the way, that if I give out annual awards at the end of the year for best, I don't know what to call that, metaphor or analogy. That's one. That's going to be the winner. So
thank you, sir.
Yeah. So. But don't you think that social selling has matured? I mean, again, you're seeing more and more. I think even at conferences I've been to recently, where people are saying, "Look, let's just drop the social from it because it's just one of the tools that salespeople should be using, and it's not the end all be all, but it's certainly critical in many respects for salespeople to be not only in terms of the outreach, but also in terms of building their own platform about themselves, right? Is to sharing content with potential prospects and building their own credibility up.
Yeah, well, that leads to the heart of one of my arguments with this, and that is that when companies make a substantial investment into so-called social selling workshops or curriculum-based sort of trainings, who really benefits? Does the company benefit by achieving revenue, or does the participant benefit by achieving personal branding? I think that's a real question that ought to be examined. But so I'm glad you brought that up. But
are they completely antithetical?
I wouldn't say they're completely antithetical, but the question is, is there really an ROI behind this, or are we building a brand for a person whose average tenure, particularly in these lead development roles, is less than 2 years? So I think there's probably, I think that at some point it should be examined whether making investments in these things is worth it. But I do see 5 undeniable benefits.
Okay, let's get to the 5. Let's get to the 5.
Yeah, let's do it. And then I'll talk to you about the 7 kind of concerns after that. But the first benefit is that, while the concept of pre-call research, Andy, is nearly 100 years old, and while the term reach out and touch someone was coined by AT&T more than 30 years ago, but social selling is unquestionably turbocharged this proven legacy practice that is decades old. To be fair, social selling did not define it. It did not invent it, but it does turbocharge it. And that is a good thing for sellers, a very good thing. I don't know
beats the phone book.
Yeah, I don't know that we need a workshop or a curriculum to leverage that possibility, but there's no question that turbocharge impact has happened as it relates to pre-call research. Second benefit, it's just undeniable, is that there's no question that certain social selling practices certainly assists with influence building. Although I will say overdoing it can backfire on you quickly.
Overdoing it how?
Overdoing it, I see lots of sellers out there now. Kind of gets into one of my other points, but I'll just blend it in here. And that is, there's been a lot of talk about content curation and distribution, which does have the potential to be powerful when applied properly, because it leads to engagement, and engagement matters. But the real drawback that I'm seeing is sellers are actually, there are third-party services now that you can kind of look at that produces or that serves up content. And Andy, I hate to say it, but I know plenty of sellers who subscribe to these services, scan some articles, pick 3 from a name that they look up to and think the world respects, and a topic that they think might be hot, and in a matter of about 30 seconds, choose 3 articles that they're going to post for the day just to move the needle on the engagement subbar of their social selling index. And I believe this whole aspect of just posting content for the sake of posting content is not helpful. In fact, I think it intellectually it's challenging, and I think to some degree there's some intellectual poverty with this sort of process, and there's some degree of spam, of just kind of spamming your LinkedIn universe by posting articles that you barely even read, just in the name of I'm going to post 3 articles.
But okay, granted, in the way you described it, certainly. But I mean, if a rep took some time to actually curate something that was of value, right, to his audience, right, that could be of value to his audience, and that was not indiscriminate, I mean, then there's value there.
Oh, listen, I got 2 undeniable comments for you there. I mean, first of all, posting original content is very valuable. It demonstrates a person's creativity. It certainly demonstrates skill. It certainly demonstrates being in tune with current topics.
But sort of unrealistic for salespeople to create content, though, or to expect them to.
I would tend to agree with you that it's unrealistic for them to create comprehensive content. But I'll tell you, one person who curates content beautifully is one of our friends, Chris Beal, the CEO at Connect and Sell. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a person who I admire. He rather than just reposting this regurgitated content in the name of posting, Chris actually finds very, very informative articles. When he reposts, he makes amazingly formidable comments that are rooted in and anchored in deep intellectual thought. And every time Chris Beal, or I noticed Greg Buckholz, the CEO of Spring CM, does this as well. Now, every time those 2 individuals in my network of about 14,000 people on LinkedIn, I always read what they have to repost, because it's profound, and their comments are profound. So I think the answer is yes, yes, and yes when done properly, and it's no, no, and no, and intellect suffers from intellectual poverty when done improperly.
Well, I think what you're bringing up a key point, though, for sales reps that are going to be reposting content, that really understand that this is part of their job. They're trying to not just do it for resume value, but trying to build some valuable value-based connection with the prospects, is that rather than just reposting the article, as you said, is add a comment to it. And show something of yourself. Show your original creativity, your original value that's coming from you personally.
I love it, Andy. I love what you're saying there. And not only that, just let's get underneath the covers of that, and let's just say this too: choose articles that are highly relevant and that are not overdone. I mean, go find real stuff that's fresh and new and that everybody else didn't post because they subscribe to the same content provider that, the next guy
You guys
signed
all
up,
have the same Google alerts.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I value people like Chris Beal and Greg Buckholz and others. Those are just two that happen to come to mind right now. They're really pulling out great content and making, very valuable commentary. And I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Well, good. Well, we need to take a short break now. But before we go to the break, I'm going to pose a hypothetical scenario for you to think about, and I'll get your answer when I come back.
Okay, great.
All right. So here you are. You've been hired as a new sales leader at a company whose sales have stalled out. And they're pretty urgent. Senior management has a fair degree of urgency to make a change. So your first week on the job, what two things could you do that would have the biggest impact going forward? So think about that. And we'll be back after the break with my guest, Kraig Kleeman. Attention, sales leaders. Would you like to give your sales team the tools to drive more quality connects, scale their outreach, and spend more time selling? Well, you can with LiveHive. Get your ROI. Try it now at livehive.com/ROI. That's LiveHive, LiveHive.com/ROI. Welcome back. My guest today, Kraig Kleeman, author, consultant, world's what's a world's best cold caller? I'm sorry. I screwed that up entirely. Sorry about that. And got a new book coming out next year, which we want to talk about as well before the end of the show. So I posed a hypothetical scenario for you before the break. New sales leader coming into a company whose sales have sort of stalled out. What two things could you do in the first week that could have the biggest impact?
Yeah, that's a loaded question there, my friend. Thank you for going easy on me today.
Wait, everybody answers this question. Everybody that comes on the show gets this question.
All right. Well, I guess I'm not alone in this, and I guess I can't dodge it. No, I'm happy to try and answer it. Fortunately for me, in the last 10 years, I've had the good fortune of working with lots of great companies, lots of great sales leaders. My CEO advisory service has connected me with lots of brilliant CEOs. There's really power in external perspectives, Andy. And I think if Stephen Jobs taught us anything, the late Stephen Jobs, and you probably read his autobiography. I thought it was brilliant. If he taught us anything, it was the importance of really, really looking through the lenses of external perspectives. Rick Smith, in his book, The 5 Traits of Extraordinary Executives, identified the number one trait of executives. It was an insatiable curiosity. It was the intellectually curious who will always outperform the executive who is not. And so in that spirit, I have a rather formulaic model for observing and with a keen eye towards 3 or 4 key areas: language, process, workflow, and talent. And so, and I know you said 1 week or 2 weeks or something like that.
1 week, 2 things, 1 week.
In that week, I would devote all of my efforts to analyzing thoroughly those 4 things and starting the journey and beginning tangible efforts at changing those 4 things:
All right, so
language, workflow, process, and talent.
So what's language?
Language, scripts, the language that the sellers are using in customer-facing mode. Is it persuasive? Is it not? Does it conform to language and principles of language that will create results? So many companies, you've heard the phrase show up and throw up and emphasize, product, me. But really, business acumen is what's important, and recasting all these scripts so that we can extract from the target buyer, what his or her pain points really are, understand it thoroughly through, again, a high-level business acumen dialogue, and then ultimately play back to them their very pain points to use as our logic for the purchase rationale for the close of the transaction. So really, all 4 of those things would be extremely tightly examined, and I would start that journey on those course correction of those 4 things.
Okay, so let's just go through them again. Language, process, workflow, talent. Okay. And how do you define the difference between process and workflow?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a process which is the broad process of what it is we're trying. There's a difference between strategy and tactics, and so we can't really move ahead with strategy unless we have the right tactics. They're both pretty intertwined, and so in that spirit, the process is sort of the superset of the entire. Like literally, the moment a sales rep starts, what he or she starts doing from like task A to task Z to sort of close the deal. It's just the entire sales process. And the workflow is just the manner in which those tasks happen. Are they laid out in an efficient way? Are they laid out in an interpretable way? Can the seller actually execute on this? Or has this actually been developed in such a way where there are gaps, where there are gotchas, where it's impossible for the seller? Are there too many steps in the process? Should we streamline it? Should we punt over this one and really making it a cohesive model that is efficient? That's sort of the two differences there.
Sure. So here's a question about, in follow-up to that, you're talking about too many steps. Do we have too many steps? Are there too many steps, or are salespeople require too many contacts and interactions with the customer to move them from point A to point B to, from interest to decision?
I think so. Every organization, Andy, is a little bit different. No two places are exactly the same. Some people have far too many steps. Others have far too few steps. But I will say this, that it's disturbing to me to see so many companies adopt this voluminous amounts of meaningless contacts with their buyers and their prospective buyers. I think it's far more beneficial to have fewer and highly meaningful contacts than bombarding them with nonstop contacts. I think some buyers are starting to view all this as spam.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think a lot of the internet is, in many ways, is just kind of an advanced way of having a courier walk into a buyer's office 20 times a day, dropping a document on his desk in his physical inbox. And so I'm grieved by some of the things that I see where volume has sadly eclipsed quality.
Yeah, so I talk about in my books and in my work with clients is that every interaction with a prospect has to have a defined goal in terms of the value you're going to deliver. And if you can't, and the value has to be defined in something that's going to help them make progress in their buying process. And if you can't meet that minimum standard, then don't do it.
Couldn't agree more. Very well stated.
Just don't do it. And I know that's anathema to lots of sellers and their sales managers because they can't stand the fact it's like, okay, what's happening with this account? Well, they can't answer the question because they don't know what the customer is expecting from them next.
And they get a lot of gunk and junk from a lot of people, and it's pretty tough to get our stuff to make it stand out from the rest of the noise. And that also gets back sort of to the language that I have tremendous respect for both the written word and the spoken word. And, a lot of my methodology, I call it the Must React System. It's the title of my first book, and it's the core methodology of, what I deploy on most of my consulting engagements. And language, just having a profound respect for language that persuades is a big, big piece of it. And again, back to your point, making the interactions highly meaningful is quite important.
Well, sort of a random question then is in your experience, ask your opinion on this. Has language become devalued? Right? Have we become in this, sort of driven by technology and the different sort of means of communication that existed? Texting obviously, doesn't reward necessarily full, complete thoughts, but it's powerful in its own way. I mean, are we in danger of sort of losing some of those basic skills?
No, Andy, I think we have lost a lot of these basic skills, and it does trouble me. even though I have 31,000 followers on Twitter, I really don't tweet much these days because my mind doesn't think in 140 characters, and I'm going to stop pretending like it does. I also dedicate, probably 5,000 plus words in my upcoming book to the topic of hermeneutics and syntactical linguistics, which really gets down to the science of language. And my arguments that I build in the book are the importance of applying language, in particular as language is persuasive to the profession of selling. And yes, I think in so many, many ways, sadly, the profession has, in terms of language, has really degenerated, or maybe has never been fully generated. But there's no question that we need to begin to look at language with a scholarly view, quite frankly, and apply it in a way that will, in a scholarly way, bring persuasion back so that deals will advance far more quickly and close with much higher percentage rates.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I'd be interested when your book comes out. We'll have another conversation. We'll talk about that.
That'd be great. I'd enjoy that. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, well, we're going to move into the last segment of the show. I've got some rapid-fire questions and answers for you. And you can give me one-word answers if you're able to, or you can elaborate as much as you want. Are you ready?
I'll give it a try.
All right. So, what's the most powerful sales tool in your arsenal?
Language.
I knew you were going to say that. After this last comment, I knew you were going to say that.
You got me pegged, Andy.
Yeah, well, no. It was a logical follow-on. Okay. So what's one tool that you use for managing your own sales that you can't live without?
A thesaurus.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I am so, speaking and conferences and the way I craft emails and I mentioned earlier my profound respect for both the spoken word and the written word. When I do these webcasts all the time, thousands of people come to these things. Mm-hmm. And no, when I prepare for these things, I put 50 hours in, usually per webcast, and I'd say the single tool that I use the most to get things crafted and I guess it goes back to language, but it would be a thesaurus. Absolutely.
Who's your sales role model?
My sales role model has increasingly become a person I mentioned a little bit earlier, Chris Beall, mm-hmm. because of his deep intellectual thought that, I haven't really seen Chris in action as a seller, so I guess I have to disclaim that a little bit. But his deep intellectual thought is very impressive. And then another person I have to say is my sales role model, two people. One is my brother, Kraig Kleeman. He's chief revenue officer at Spring CM. What I love about Kraig is his ability to view things analytically, his ability to size things up organizationally, but he hasn't gotten lost in the administrative gunk and junk. He is an absolute deal maker through and through. And it's pretty tough to find these days a chief revenue officer for a large organization that can understand the organizational and analytical components to the job and still in the field be the best face in the company to close the deal. And Carrie and a few other people that I've observed in my career are some of those. So I have to put my brother Kraig Kleeman up there. Shout out for Carrie.
Perfect. Shout out for Carrie. All right. Besides your own book, what's the one book every salesperson should read?
You're going to laugh at this, and the audience is probably going to get a real chuckle out of this, but the name of the book is called Systematic Theology, and it's written by Dr. Wayne Grudem, who, and the book is truly a book on just that, systematic theology, but he breaks down language. The term hermeneutics, which is the science of language, has been applied in really 3 or 4 primary ways: law, religion, and philosophy. Those are the 3 sort of areas of society and culture and life where people really want to get to the root and the meaning of words. And to be perfectly candid with you, as I've created my practice, as I've developed call scripts, both, for voice and for written, for emails and things like that, there's no doubt in my mind that Dr. Grudem's book systematic theology has been the number one influence on me personally for what I've done. Maybe the second one would be Anton Chekhov, a Russian playwright. He wrote, he's arguably the best short story. And probably, Google him, and everybody in the world probably say he's the best short story writer in all of history. But he wrote a play called Three Sisters. Just a fascinating. You've seen it?
Oh, yes.
Ominous. So ominous and rather dark in some ways. But when it comes to language and process, and what I mean by in that case, the stage movement along with the language associated with that particular show is absolutely mystifies me. I go back and read.
So what's the lesson the salesperson will get from it?
Well, the lesson they would get is certainly the power of language. They would certainly get the power of process just by watching the on-stage movement. I mean, everything is choreographed perfectly. And I think that sellers ought to view all their presentations, all their customer communications, all as highly choreographed, just like running lines for a play. I mean, that's how powerful and how crisp and sharp we want sellers to be. So those would be the two things I'd recommend.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I always, people ask me that question. I say poetry. Take the collection of Robert Frost poems and just see how precise you have to become with your choice of words to make the poem work. Well, it's the same thing with a call script or an email.
Could not agree more.
All right. Here's really a tough question is, what's your favorite music to listen to sort of get yourself pumped up?
Oh, that's pretty easy. That I could name three, but I'll name one. That would be U2 because I'm a big fan of Bono and he's my personal friend and I am grateful to him. I get backstage passes all the time at all these crazy concerts and stuff. But I really admire Bono's life and love his music and it inspires me and it does pump me up. Thank you for asking.
Okay. So what's the first sales activity you do every day?
First sales activity I do every day is check. Do you mean other than the innocuous things like checking email?
No. The first sales activity. It could be checking email.
Yeah, no. I would say it's checking email and checking LinkedIn and checking Twitter, and those would probably be the three. Those three. Here I am dissing social selling and telling you the first thing I do is go to social selling.
Go to Twitter,
social
and
media. Yeah, go to social media. But those are where the important messages come from, and I've got to see if I've got a message from a client or something or a prospective client. So that's the first thing I do. Rather innocuous, but
okay. Last question.
Yes, sir.
The one question you get asked most frequently by salespeople is
Kraig, if you were, these would be from younger sellers, and they often ask me this, Kraig, if you were my age, very early in your career, first, second job out of school and really wanting to be somebody and make something out of my career. What have you learned sort of now, later in life, after having written, books and, consulted with, with highly valuable, high growth organizations, things like that. Well, after all those experiences, what do you wish you knew then when you were my age that you now know? And my answer is pretty simple, and that is that fact-based research always trumps opinion or emotion. And when I was young, and I think I love young people, but if they're anything like me when I was young, it's easy to fall prey to allowing opinion and emotion override fact-based research. And getting to a place of letting research trump everything and facts trump everything. That's the advice I would give. That's the question I get, and that's the advice I would give.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, hey, I want to thank you for joining me today. My guest has been Kraig Kleeman. Kraig, tell people how they can find more about you.
Yeah, well, they can go to my website, kraigkleeman.com. Those are with K's, so it's Kraig with a K and Kleeman with a K, so that's kraigkleeman.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn, just Kraig Kleeman, and send me a connection request. My Twitter handle is @Kraig_Kleeman. And I guess if they really wanted to email me these days, they could do it at Kraig@kraigkleeman.com. So those would be the primary ways to reach me.
Very good. Well, again, thank you for joining me. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day, every day, to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. Subscribing to this podcast is an easy way to do that because then you'll make sure you don't miss any of our conversations with top business experts like our guest today, Kraig Kleeman, who share their expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining us, and until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.